Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please join us today in the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we'll be covering Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, Chapter 13, Part 2. The Haṁsa-avatāra Answers the Questions of the Sons of Brahmā. Hare Krishna, please join us for Jai Radha Madhav prayers. Jai jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Please join us for Mangalacharan prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiyet. Shavatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridayantasto Hya Bhadrani Vidhunoti Suhasatam Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Please join us today in this class, the recitation of verse 19 of Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, Chapter 13. The Haṁsa-avatāra Answers the Questions of the Sons of Brahmā. Samamachintaya devaha.
Samamachintaya deva.
Prashna paratitirshaya.
Prashna paratitirshaya.
Tasyaham hamsarupena.
Tasyaham hansarupena.
Sakasham agamam tada.
Sakasham agamam tada. Samamachintaya deva.
Samamachintaya deva.
Prashna paratitirshaya.
Prashna paratitirshaya.
Tasyaham hansarupena.
Tasyaham hamsarupena.
Sakasham gamam tada.
Sakasham agamam tada. Translation by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer to the question that was puzzling him, and thus he fixed his mind on me, the Supreme Lord. At that time, in my form of Haṁsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma. Purport. Haṁsa means swan, and the specific ability of the swan is to separate a mixture of milk and water, extracting the rich milky portion. Similarly, Lord Krishna appeared as Haṁsa, or the swan, in order to separate the pure consciousness of Lord Brahma from the modes of material nature. Hare Krishna. Please join us for Guru Pranati. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshitarine Om Jnana Timrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun militam yena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim Yat kripa tadaham vande Shri Gurum dinataranam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare 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 Krishna. So Lord appears in unlimited forms, and one of such appearance in this particular pastime that's being discussed is Haṁsa-avatāra in the form of a swan, to separate out the pure consciousness of Lord Brahma from the modes of material nature. Because Lord Brahma, when he was being asked this question by the 4 sons of Lord Brahma, the Chatur Kumaras, headed by Sanaka. And who are these Chatur Kumaras? The names are Sanak, Sanatan, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. And what is the question that they asked? The question that they asked is, what is the purpose of yoga? Because the mind is constantly meditating on the sense objects. And so the sense objects enter into the mind. So it's not like the sense objects physically enter into the mind. It is like the mind is constantly meditating on these sense objects. And thus, a living entity is undergoing various kind of miseries in this material world. So what is the purpose of yoga, and how can one separate themselves from the entanglement with the sense objects, the modes of material nature? And Lord Brahma, he wanted to answer this question, however, being impacted by his activities. And what is his activities? He's creating the material universe. So the secondary creation is his responsibility. And this activity is in the mode of passion. So when influenced by the mode of passion, he was unable to talk about the transcendental subject matter. So this is, again, a lesson we should take. That when we are engaged in various kind of activities, we are being influenced by different kind of modes of material nature. There are 3 modes of material nature: mode of goodness, sattva guna; mode of passion, rajaguna; and mode of ignorance, tamoguna. And being engaged in creation of this material universe. So this is the secondary creation. First primary creation was from Mahavishnu, from the pores of his body and from his breathing, various universes came out. And then he further expanded as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, from whose navel sprouted this lotus flower on which Lord Brahma took birth. So that's secondary creation. And being so influenced by the mode of passion, he was unable to answer. So he immediately took shelter of higher power. And who's this higher power? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. And this particular incident is being narrated by Lord Shri Krishna to Uddhava. Why? Because Uddhava asked similar question. That in this material world, mind is constantly contemplating the sense objects, meditating on them, and thus various kind of miseries befall on the living entity. And how can one be free from them? Even though earlier in the previous chapter, Lord Krishna revealed to him the process by taking to devotional service, and one does not even have to perform extensive sacrifices, very hard to perform austerities, doesn't have to perform extensive, speculative knowledge, development of knowledge and so forth. One doesn't have to take the path of Karma Yogi, Ashtanga Yogi and Jnana Yogi. Just by being able to associate with Lord Shri Krishna or any of his bona fide representative, of course, his devotees, his associates, one can easily be purified. So now, when somebody associates with the devotees, right, then the devotees are constantly engaged in what kind of activities? Devotional service. And there are 9 processes of devotional service. Prahlad Maharaj, he reveals when his father asked that second question, what have you learned in this school? At that time he reveals this, the 9 processes of devotional service. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. Shravanam, hearing. So just by hearing, Parikshit Maharaj attains perfection when he's hearing from 7 days, 7 nights. So again, this is about 5th, 6th day of his time when he is continuously hearing. And who is he hearing from? Shukdev Goswami. Kirtanam. Just by reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukdev Goswami, he attains perfection. So even by following one of the processes, one can attain perfection. Smaranam, Prahlad Maharaj attained perfection by constantly remembering the Lord. Smaranam is remembering. Pada Sevanam, Goddess Lakshmi, Goddess of Fortune, she attains perfection just by serving the Lord. So if you see every time, it's again we've always shown that in Vaikuntha, Lord is lying in Yoga Nidra and Mother Lakshmi, Goddess of Fortune, she is pressing his feet, serving him in essence. Archanam, Prithu Maharaj, he performed the worship, Archa Vigraha form worship, right, as it said. So by performing deity worship, he attains perfection. Now Prithu Maharaj, he only was able to perform 99 Ashwamedh Yagyas. The 100th one, when he was trying to attempt that, Indra was becoming insecure and he was stealing away the horse, right? And at that time, Lord Brahma came to pacify Prithu Maharaj, why are you doing the 100th one? And then Lord Vishnu along with Indra came and, expressed his desire that Prithu Maharaj need not perform the 100th one. And by not performing 100th one, Prithu Maharaj is more glorified than Indra. Indra's position can be taken by a living entity who performs 100 Ashwamedh Yagyas. But that was not the desire of Prithu Maharaj. He was a plenary portion of Lord Shri Krishna himself. And also sometimes it's also referred to as Shaktaveshavta. So again, in reality, he attains perfection as given in the Shastras just by performing deity worship. And Vandanam, by singing prayers, Akrur attains perfection. And Akrur prayed to the Lord twice, right? First is when he was going over to Vrindavan. And then when bringing back Lord Krishna at that time, so during this journey, when he took the dip at the lake and he was able to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram in the form of Vishnu and Sankarshan Nag at that time by singing prayers. And later on in Mathura, when Lord Krishna visited, he again recited prayers. He attained perfection by doing that. Dasyam, Hanumanji attains perfection by serving the Lord, by being his servant, as in Ramayana, right? And then Sakhyam, Arjuna attains perfection by being friend to the Lord. And Atma Nivedanam, Bali Maharaj, Daityaraj Bali Maharaj, he attains perfection by surrendering everything to Lord Shri Krishna. So here, as this question is being raised, Lord Krishna starts revealing some of the amazing lessons. And we covered in the first part some of those lessons, as Lord Krishna reveals to Uddhav that, he had revealed this to the four Kumaras when they had inquired the same question from Lord Brahma. So that's the second part. But in the first part, just to recap, we'll be, quickly covering some of those topics. So Lord Krishna, he reveals that just by coming to the mode of goodness, one can, be free from the mode of passion and ignorance. And when one is situated in the mode of goodness, then of course, the religious principle, they manifest, they become visible, one can realize them, one can know them and realize them. So from that perspective, we talked about the four religious principles: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, right? And also how they are related with the four ages. Kriteta dadhayate vishnum tretayam yajato makhe dvapare paricharyayam kalo tadhari ketanat. So in Krita Yuga, dhayate vishnum, people were very austere, so they could meditate for tens of thousands of years. Prachetas, they meditate for 10,000 years based on the songs given by Lord Shiva. So Rudra Gita is also being referred there. And they were able to see Lord Vishnu and thus attain perfection. However, people became intoxicated. So the austerity, that particular leg of religion, went away as Treta Yuga came. But cleanliness, mercy and truthfulness were still there. Treta, Yam yajato makehe. So people could perform fire sacrifices and attain perfection, attain knowledge and realization. So that's what they engaged in. So those sacrifices were for the Treta Yuga because you could not perform. And even in Satyug, in Krita Yuga, 60,000 years Vishwamitra meditated and then Menaka disturbed him, right? So many sages, after tens of thousands of years, they could be still bewildered by various apsaras and various other living entities. So it is also very important to understand that, following the process and knowing the process is good, but then also understand that we don't have such a long age. We are not Haṁsas, because everyone who was born in the Satyuga were Haṁsas. They were like swans because they could separate the absolute truth from the influence of the material modes. So again, from that perspective, they were very much elevated. And that's such a long span of life. And once heard, they would remember. Even till Dwapar Yuga, this characteristic was there, that once heard, people could remember something for life. And as Treta Yuga went away, of course, that is where, cleanliness, so illicit sex destroys cleanliness. So over a period of time, in Dwapar Yuga, people were able to still have mercy and truthfulness. So they would go on pilgrimage, paricharyayam, Dwapare paricharyayam. So by going to pilgrimages and associating with devotees over there, submissively inquiring with from devotees about the absolute truth, right? One was able to attain perfection. And we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, so many personalities have been identified. Even Uddhava is being sent on a pilgrimage by Lord Shri Krishna to take this message to Badrikashram and for the great sages there, and especially Nar Narayan Rishi, because Lord Krishna wanted to satisfy them. He was so busy on his, on carrying out delivering the burden of the earth, that he did not get the chance. So he is putting it to his close associate, Uddhava, who is a pure devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. He is also cousin of Lord Shri Krishna. He is his friend. He is also an advisor to Lord Shri Krishna and the Yadavas. And on top of that, he is a disciple of Brihaspati. So he is a highly learned personality. Yet at the same time, he simply took to serving Lord Shri Krishna. So Lord Krishna would pass on all his clothes and everything to Uddhava. So he looked like Lord Shri Krishna. He wore clothes of Lord Shri Krishna. So people would sometimes get confused, like in when the gopis first saw when Uddhava was sent to Vrindavan, they first thought that this is Krishna, but then they observed his mannerism and his behavior, and they could understand that he is not Krishna, he is a different person, and so they inquired from him. So Uddhava is a highly exalted, pure devotee of Lord Shri Krishna, and yet at the same time he is asking all these questions for our benefit. And of course, when he has to take this message for the sages, he is inquiring to fully understand the message so that it can be propagated for the benefit of us, the human race in Kali age, right? Because of the influence of Kali age, there are various, deterioration in the characteristics of human race has come into being. Now, after Dwapar Yuga finishes and Kali age appears, and this is where Shukdev Goswami is reciting to Parikshit Maharaj for 7 days, 7 nights Srimad Bhagavatam. And the only element is truthfulness, because mercy got destroyed because of meat eating, right? So now truthfulness is there, and gambling even destroys truthfulness as this age advances. And so, yes, thank you. So as, so that's why one has to raise oneself to the mode of goodness. And this is a simple way. Srila Prabhupada made it so simple in these times that, by just taking shelter of a spiritual master and following the 4 regulatory principles, even if you have not taken shelter of the spiritual master, you can still start performing the regulatory principles. They are not just limited to people who are initiated, they are open to everyone, because everyone should be able to come to the mode of goodness, and the religious principles will become manifest to them. And what are these? First one is no intoxication, because it destroys austerity. Second one is no meat eating, because it destroys no illicit sex, because it destroys cleanliness. Third one is no meat eating, because it destroys mercy. And fourth one is no gambling, because it destroys truthfulness, the 4 limbs of religion. And even better than that is to take to devotional service, chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So when we take to devotional service, which is translated to the 3 modes of material nature, in combination with these 4 regulatory principles, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, and no gambling, it becomes like a perfect combination. So we can come up to the level of goodness, mode of goodness, and Lord Krishna says that by taking to devotional service, one can come to the transcendental phase, which is Vishuddha Tattva, pure goodness, above the three modes of material nature, and one can be properly situated. And when he is appearing as Haṁsa-avatāra, before that he gave some analogies, right? One of the analogy given was that just like in the bamboo forest, because of the rubbing of the bamboo, sometimes fire is created, the sparks create and they catch onto the wood. So fire is created, and that fire destroys the very cause of its birth, the bamboo forest. So similarly, we have this body, this material body, yet when we engage ourselves in devotional service, with constant engagement in devotional service, chanting of the holy name, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, so we talked about the 5 most potent forms of devotional services, where even a neophyte can experience the love of God at the topmost level. And what are these 5 most potent forms of devotional services? Reading Srimad Bhagavatam, deity worship, staying at a dham, right? Staying at a place of pilgrimage, where Lord has performed various pastimes, chanting of the holy name, and devotee association. So again, devotee association comes in. So devotee association is paramount. And of the 6 principles of spiritual advancement, Srila Rupa Goswami, he reveals in UDDHAVA, Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada has translated UDDHAVA in English, which reveal Utsahan Nishchayat Dhairya Tat Tat Karma Pravartanat Sangatyaga Sato Vritte Sadbhir Bhakti Prasiddhati. Utsahan, with great enthusiasm, Nishchayat, with great determination, Dhairyat, being patient, Tat Tat Karma Pravartanat, following the 9 processes of regulative, devotional service. Sangatyaga. So this is Asat Sangatyaga. People who are engaged in doing various kind of gossips and speculative discussions, rather engaging with the devotees, in the association of devotees, engaging in devotional service. Hearing about Lord's glorious name, form, activities, pastime, associates and devotees. So again, that gets added on in this chapter. And Sato Vrittehe, and following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. So, we take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, because that is the process. And when we take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, we follow in the footsteps of acharyas. So there are 2 important aspects that come in when you follow in the footsteps of acharyas. Anukaran and Anusharan. Anukaran is imitation, so that will not help us, right? Because that is like someone is trying to imitate the action of a highly exalted person, right? Rather, the principle given by Rupa Goswami, Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is that one has to take shelter of the previous acharyas, follow their instructions. So even that is considered as a seva. When you follow the instructions of the spiritual master and the acharyas. And we have 3 references, sadhu, guru and shastra. So we take reference, knowledge from these and make sure that they have properly balanced, and we don't surrender the intelligence. Srila Prabhupada always, in his purpose, he identified that don't surrender your intelligence, use your intelligence to be able to discriminate between the various subject matters and understand that everything has relationship with Lord Shri Krishna. And this is an important lesson that we hear in this chapter. Then everything is related to Lord Shri Krishna. And when we think of something as not related to Lord Shri Krishna and think that this is something that I can enjoy, that is material consciousness. And when we think that everything is related to Lord Shri Krishna and thus it should be used in Lord Shri Krishna's service, that is Krishna consciousness. It's a very simple, subtle mindset difference. That is something we have to take to our heart. And now that Janmashtami is coming, right? And with Janmashtami, we are seeing so many wonderful pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna and Vrindavan being narrated online. So many opportunities are there for us to virtually be there. And we actually sometimes virtually perform Vrindavan Parikrama. So we may be physically here, but our heart is in Vrindavan. We are churning our heart into this soft, sweet butter. and hoping that as Janmashtami comes and Lord appears, He finds the butter of our heart, the churning of our heart, by constantly meditating on His name, form, activities, glories, associates and devotees. In the association of devotees, we are constantly churning our heart to this sweet, soft form that is very relishable, and hope Lord finds it relishable and is pleasing to Him, so that He, as Makhan Chor, as the butter thief, would steal our heart away. And that is our desire, right? Devotees always want to meditate. So when there is Krishna, there cannot be Maya, right? Material energy cannot be present at that place. So that is a very simple, confidential truth which is easily available to everyone, and one has to just take to it, take to the practice of chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So just by following the 6 principles of spiritual advancement, we can continue to transcend the 3 modes of material nature. And then Lord talks about the various factors, and Uddhava asks a very important question, that even though one knows this, why are they constantly being engaged? The mind is engaging them, the intelligence is engaging them in various kind of activities. And why does a person behave like, now pay attention, a dog, an ass, and a goat? So here Lord Krishna, He reveals to him that it is only because of the influence of the modes of material nature, especially passion and ignorance. And the purport very nicely is described. That when one is behaving like a dog, and Srila Prabhupada gave a very nice example. So once he was on a morning walk and he pointed to a dog who was running with his master. And that dog was healthy, happy, and he was running on the beach with his master. And then he pointed to some of the street dogs, and those street dogs had been bitten by various other dogs, and he said, what's the difference between the two? And then he reveals the answer that the one who is running with his master is Sanath. He has a nath, right? While the ones who are the street dogs, they are anath. They do not have a master. So they are constantly being beaten by other dogs, and they are constantly being tormented, So if we want to flourish in our spiritual journey, we need to take shelter of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Lord Shri Krishna. So Lord Krishna, by being merciful, He appears in the form of a bona fide spiritual master to us. And we can take shelter of such a spiritual master, and then we can continue to flourish in our spiritual journey, advance quickly. While people who do not take shelter of the Lordship and His devotees, then they are in this case like that, those of the dogs, the street dogs. And another characteristic given is that the dogs always want to, when they see a she-dog, then they want to enjoy her. And that is material propensity, because they're thinking that this is different, right? That mindset is that sometimes a man sees, or a woman sees, the opposite sex person who's very beautiful, then they want to enjoy them. When they see a nice position, they want to acquire that position. When they see nice kind of food stuff, they want to relish that food stuff. That is material consciousness. And we talked about Krishna consciousness is when we see everything in relationship with Krishna. And when we see everything in relationship with Krishna, we understand that it has to be used in Lord Krishna's service. We also talk about the example when somebody is walking and finds a dollar note on the road. Then there are 3 actions that can follow after realizing that there is a dollar note. One can ignore, saying that I've got nothing to do. So that's like the case of Gyan Yogi. They are like, okay, I've got nothing to do. The second reaction is, somebody could pick it up and put it in their pocket, finders keepers. And that is the case of a karmi, one who wants to enjoy this material world, thinking it different from Lord Shri Krishna, separate from Lord Shri Krishna. And then the third one is the mindset of a devotee who understands that everything is connected with Lord Shri Krishna. So such a person would find that dollar note and then deliver it to the owner. Everything belongs to Lord Shri Krishna, so should be used in His service. And that is Krishna consciousness. And we should be very careful of using every, single penny. One of the examples that Srila Prabhupada gives is when he was, giving a check for Vrindavan for the construction of Krishna Balaram temple. At that time, the devotee who had come, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, had come to take the check. Srila Prabhupada said, how much is it for you to take a rickshaw from Punjabi Bagh to Vrindavan? He said, 1 rupee 50 cents. So this is 1970s we are talking about. And then Srila Prabhupada turned to his secretary and said, how much is it to send it by a registered post to the bank? And he said, 75 paisa, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said, okay, don't worry, we'll send it directly to the bank in the account because it's going to save 75 paisa. So he was so conscious that every paisa should be saved and properly used. And this consciousness we need to again develop because there is a definite room for improvement, right? We're constantly improving ourselves, so why not improve our practices? And understand that everything has a relationship with Lord Shri Krishna and be very conscious of how we spend, what we spend and where we spend and for what purpose we spend. So here as Lord Krishna continues to reveal, so we talked about the example of a dog. Now the second example is that of an ass. An ass wants to enjoy the she-ass while she kicks him. And even though he's going through this, suffering, he's still trying to enjoy, and that flickering pleasure, here today, gone tomorrow. And this is his foolishness. And yet at the same time, the same ass is also called a beast of burden. Can easily find grass anywhere, but goes through a lot of pain, right? Takes on burden on its back and serving its master, carrying heavy loads. While his master just gives him little grass, which he can find anywhere, and he's happy. So that is foolishness, right? Because of that, so we should not be so foolish. And then the third one is that of a goat. A goat is nicely fed and taken to the, butcher's place. So at that time, the goat is still meditating on enjoying the she-goat, not knowing that the death is befalling on it. And so this is where we have to be very, very conscious that every moment we are advancing toward, this body is advancing towards death, not we. We are eternal beings, living entity are eternal, but the body is nashwar, it's temporary. So it will be relinquished one day. So we have to live with that understanding that every moment is important and we should be engaging in devotional service, constantly thinking, meditating on the name, form, activities, pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. And with Janmashtami coming, there are amazing prayers. And of course, in the spiritual world, it is said that there is no concept of time. So everyone in the spiritual world is engaged in devotional service. And Lord reveals as his form of eternity, knowledge and bliss. And this we know in Brahma Samhita is given. Ishvaraha paramaha Krishnaha Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govindaha Sarva Karana Karanam. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. So we were asked this question that, only there the reference is given of Satchidananda Vigraha. That Lord's body is, his body and soul are not different. In our case it is different. And he is full of eternity, knowledge and bliss. Well, actually there is another place this reference has been given. Namam Ishwaram Sachidananda Rupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam. So here, Namam Ishwaram Sachidananda Rupam. Sat Chit Anand. So Lord Krishna is Sat, is eternal, Chit, full of knowledge, and Anand. He is filled with transcendental bliss. He is also called the reservoir of all pleasures, transcendental pleasures. So Lord, when he is there cannot be Maya, right? Krishna Surya Sama Maya He Andhakara Jahan Krishna Taha Nahi Maya Ra Adhikara. So with Janmashtami coming, if we immerse our time in just engaging in devotional services, singing about the glories of Lord Shri Krishna, and constantly churn our heart to the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. How can there be any Maya? How can there be any darkness? Because we will be in complete sun in the presence of Lord Shri Krishna, who is like sun. So the analogy is given. Then Lord Shri Krishna tells Uddhava about the 10 subject matters, where basically how one associates with these subjects. So we discussed those as well. And the 3 modes of material nature, how one has different way of interacting with these various subject matters. What kind of scriptures one chooses in mode of goodness, passion, ignorance. There's a vast difference. The kind of liquids one eats. Water, pure water is eaten in the mode of goodness. Various kind of other beverages are taken in the mode of passion, just to enjoy the taste. And then in the mode of ignorance, all kind of intoxicants are taken. And then one's association with one's children and general populace. The devotee association is taken in the case of devotees. Mode of goodness, people take association of other people who are in the mode of goodness. People in the mode of passion take association with other people on the mode of passion. So again, birds of same feather flock together. And then the particular place, the time, activities, all these are also distributed along the 3 modes of material nature: birth, meditation, various kind of chanting of mantras. So in mode of goodness, one wants to elevate higher to Vishuddha Sattva, to transcend even the mode of goodness. So the mantras at that level are meditating on the Supreme Lord, while glorifying the Supreme Lord. While in the mode of passion, one is attracted by the flowery language of Vedas. So they are trying to do mantras and various kind of sacrifices so that they get more and more material benefits they want to enjoy. Not realizing that even if you are in a first class jail or a third class jail, you are still in jail. Rather, the important motive should be to spend the time to get out of jail. So this material world has also been said to be like a jail. And Maya Devi, the material energy, is the jailer of this material jail. And then the purificatory rituals, even they are different. In the mode of ignorance, one is just making arrangements to become lazy and not be active anymore. Then after discussing the bamboo forest, Lord Krishna, he reveals about the state of one's consciousness, right? Wakefulness, sleeping and deep sleep. So this is where Haṁsa-avatāra. Now one of the interesting things is when Haṁsa-avatāra appears, first Lord Brahma worships him. So it's said that Chaturkumaras, Sanak, Sanatan, Sanandana and Sanat Kumar, along with keeping Lord Brahma in the front, they worshipped Lord Haṁsa-avatāra, Lord Krishna appearing in the form of a Haṁsa-avatāra, because he is going to extract out the pure consciousness of Lord Brahma and the Chaturkumaras from the modes of material nature, the influence of the modes of material nature. So that's the reason, that's the importance. Sometimes people ask this question, why did Lord appear as Haṁsa-avatāra when he is Vishnu's, why didn't he appear even in his Vishnu form? Well, there is a significance. When Lord does one action, he solves many purposes by that single action. And why can't he appear in Haṁsa-avatāra? It's very interesting that sometimes Mayavadis say, if Krishna appeared in a human form, that means he's limited in the human form. Just because we are limited in our human form doesn't mean the same thing applies to Lord. He can be everywhere. Aham sarvasya prabhu, matta sarvam pravartate. Everything can still reside in him while he can still appear as in a human form. And he expands unlimitedly. So when he expands unlimitedly, all the Vishnu Tattvas are considered non-different. Srila Prabhupada reveals they are only differentiated by their various activities, right? Sometimes the paraphernalia also differentiates them, but it's mainly oriented towards the various activities that they are engaged in. Like Lord Balaram. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His first expansion is Lord Balaram, who is also referred to as Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we talk about all the Vishnu Tattvas, we say Supreme Personality. So plural is not used. And on top of that, the second aspect is Lord Balaram is also said to be Adi Guru, right? And Nityananda Prabhu, who is an expansion of Lord Brahma, is also referred to as Adi Guru because Vishnu Tattva. And
when we are referring to Supreme Personality of Godhead, something gets added on with Lord Balaram. Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead, because he is in the mood of service, serving Lord Krishna. He has equal potency as Lord Krishna, but he has, at the same time, there are other aspects of Lord Krishna. There is Venu Madhurya, Rup Madhurya, Leela Madhurya, and so forth. Yet Lord Balaram also shows many of the similar characteristics like Leela Madhurya. He also has his gopis, and he is also performing Ras Leela and so many other activities. Yet he is always engaged and eager to serve Lord Krishna. Even appearing, in Dwapara Yuga, he is appearing as his older brother on Lord's order. So again, that's also being identified there. Such beautiful pastimes of Lord Krishna, where he is appearing as, butter thief and stealing with the hearts of these gopis and playing with the Gopa boys and even allowing the Gopa boys to win over them. And it's very interesting, we were reading this pastime, and every time we read it, we enjoy it even more. That's the amazing part. If you read a mundane story, you just read it once and you feel like, okay, I have already read it. But when you read Krishna Leela, Lord Krishna's pastimes, they are so sweet. So Lord Krishna, he was, per se, caught by a gopi, an elderly gopi, when he was stealing makhan. And at that time she said that I'm going to take you. So His Grace, Gauranga Prabhu, he discusses this pastime. So we were listening to his, narration of this pastime. So as she's holding Lord Krishna and taking to Mother Yashoda, at that time she takes to Mother Yashoda, he said, now I have caught Krishna, he was stealing this butter. And at that time Mother Yashoda starts laughing. What does she say? The gopi, she looks down at Krishna, she was holding Krishna's hand, and she sees that it's her own son. And she is puzzled. And so she comes back, but at that time, while coming back, she sees that Krishna has taken his form, and she says that, this is not right, next time I'll take you. And so Krishna says, you be careful. Next time I might appear in your husband's form. So, you can imagine how beautiful, pastimes, these lovely pastimes of Lord Krishna are, as he is continuing to narrate. As Shukdev Goswami is narrating to Parikshit Maharaj, and Lord Krishna himself is revealing to Uddhav as he is appearing in Haṁsa-avatāra. So Lord is unlimited, right? We are limited. I can be here, you can be there. But Lord can be everywhere, right? So here, Lord Krishna is saying, why, he is appearing in Haṁsa-avatāra, and we have to understand, why can't he appear? If he is unlimited, he can appear in whatever form he feels like. And this is a very important difference. Yesterday one question was being asked that can one following devotional service raise to the mode of goodness? Actually, one can even transcend the modes of goodness, or the mode of material nature. Mode of goodness is still a material mode, right? While one engaged in devotional service transcends the three modes of material nature. And there are various examples given right here in Srimad Bhagavatam. Narad Muni, before getting his spiritual body, who was he? He was the son of a maid servant, right? A Shudra. And again, we also have to understand, sometimes people only pay attention to that aspect, don't realize that later on it's revealed that Narad Muni was actually a Gandharva who was cursed to become the son of a maid servant, to fall in the mode of ignorance. And so in the mode of ignorance, he had, during the Chaturmasya, the association of Vedantists. And so he was able to immediately engage in devotional service and transcend the three modes of material nature. So it's not that you have to be in mode of, if you are in mode of ignorance, you have to first go to a mode of passion, then come to the mode of goodness, and then finally come to the transcendental platform. You can take to the transcendental platform wherever you are right now. So that's why when the question was being asked from Srila Prabhupada, he was being asked by his disciples that how long will it take for us to become Krishna conscious? Srila Prabhupada said you can become Krishna conscious instantly, at this very moment, just by taking to devotion service, just by surrendering, because Lord Krishna says, Sarva dhammam parityajya mam ekam sharanam vaja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishashmi mashacha. So give up all varieties of religion. Just surrender unto me. I will deliver you from all kind of reactions. Do not fear, Ma Shucha. So he is giving us this promise that just by surrendering, by taking to devotional service, by surrendering at the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, who is such a compassionate father, who is such a wonderful personality, who is constantly, Lord Krishna, his eyes, means his description, if when we see his name form, his form is like Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham. So his beauty defeats the beauty of a crore of cupids. That's like 10 million cupids. You can imagine how wonderful Lord Krishna is. And here he's appearing in the form of a swan to separate out the consciousness. And here he gives the example that how to separate out the consciousness. He says, first of all, they ask this question, who are you? Right, the Brahmanas. Chaturkumars. The four sons of Lord Brahma, headed by Sanaka. So these Chaturkumaras who decided to stay in the form of young boys, 4-5-year-old boys. Sanak, Sanatan, Sananda and Sanat Kumar, they decided that they would keep their body, they would not grow their body. Of course, during the time their age may grow, but their body will not change. So when they saw Lord Haṁsa, he said, who are you? And now Lord Krishna, the way he responds in his Haṁsa-avatāra form is very interesting. Because Lord Brahma had already worshipped Lord Haṁsa-avatāra, right? So they should understand who Haṁsa-avatāra is, yet at the same time Haṁsa-avatāra is in a way responding to them that if you are thinking that I am like a living entity like you, and that all living entities are same, like all jivas are same, then this question is not relevant. So if you think in this way, then the question is irrelevant. And if you think that I am a material body, so again this is from the perspective that I am made up of the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air and ether, then again the question is irrelevant. And if you think that all these 5 elements are actually one, then we all living material bodies are one, then also this question is irrelevant. So if you're thinking in 5, then you should actually ask, who are you 5? So again, he's identifying them that they should pay attention because the message that is coming out next is going to be deeper. And he already addresses them as Brahmanas. So the Chaturkumaras were addressed because they were already situated in a mode of goodness. And even that mode of goodness is material mode. And he is going to be elevated. Now, somebody asked that we talked about Devashi Narad, who was, son of a maidservant. What are the examples of other modes, like mode of passion? How can someone come directly, transcend the modes of material nature when they are in the mode of passion? Bali Maharaj, Daityaraj Bali Maharaj was an administrator of the universe. So he had actually won over all the heavenly planets. Yet at the same time, he performed worship of Lord Vamandev. And when Lord Vamandev asked him the 3 steps of life, he surrendered everything, including himself, his own body. So that's why he is glorified as Atma Nivedanam. He immediately transcended the 3 modes of material nature. That's another example, if you want to know, from mode of passion, somebody coming. And then from mode of goodness, many personalities are known who transcended, just like Shukdev Goswami. He was actually already situated in the mode of Vishuddha Sattva, so from the birth itself. Vyasadev, again, he is empowered incarnation Shaktavesh of Lord Krishna. So again, he is also, transcended 3 modes of material nature, and so many personalities. We also talked about, like, sometimes people who are bewildered. So we will be talking about some of those cases as well, that under the modes of material nature, how one behaves differently. And, how it is so disturbing to them and disturbing to everyone else around them. Because of the influence of modes of material nature causes one to become very proud. And pride cometh before fall. So Haṁsa-avatāra, let's continue back and then we'll touch back on the influence of pride on living entities due to the modes of material nature. So as Haṁsa-avatāra, Lord is revealing that, my dear Brahmanas, you should understand that he is revealing that I am Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because of the wakefulness, sleep and deep sleep, that is the influence. One can perceive different kind of objects. So similarly, under the three modes of material nature, one thinks of different, sense objects as something that they would enjoy. So important thing is that when we talk about sense objects, that's a material perspective. Various objects are to be used not for senses, but in the service of master of the senses, Hrishikesha. And he reveals them. So wakefulness is in the mode of goodness. Sleeping state is when you are dreaming state is in the mode of passion, because at that time your body is inactive but your mind is working. So when you are wakeful, mind as well as body both are working, and you are constantly interacting with the sense objects under the modes of material nature, especially mode of goodness. But in dreaming state, sleeping state, mode of passion, because mind is creating various objects and you are interacting with those objects. And then the deep sleep is where there is no dream, right? Deep sleep is where everything becomes void. You're constantly, so even the mind is, not thinking. So at that particular time is like laziness, the mode of ignorance. And he's revealing that one, when wakes up and observes these three states, can understand that one is different from these three states and the objects perceived in these three states. And that is the nature of this material world. So when influenced and thinking of this material world as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, one thinks in this manner as separate and wants to enjoy them, and that is the cause of our misery. So we should understand that instead of trying to enjoy this material world and constantly having the opposite result in return, which is the sufferings in this material world. That's why the material world is called Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam. So when we see what is material world, that is our perception of seeing everything around us as separate from Krishna, filled with sense objects that we want to enjoy. That is material world. If we think everything is an expansion of Lord Krishna's energy and should be used in Lord Krishna's service, then there is no material world. We are in spiritual world, because we are engaging in activities that are performed in spiritual world. And Srila Prabhupada was asked by his disciple that how many % of people need to become Krishna conscious for this planet Earth to become Vaikuntha? Srila Prabhupada's response was only 2%. If 2% of people on this planet Earth become Krishna conscious, then this planet will become Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha means there is no misery. So all we have to do is to start with us as an example. Take to devotional service, take to the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And engage in devotional service. Janmashtami is coming. Such a wonderful time. And we have so many wonderful songs given by Acharyas that we can sing day and night. We can engage in so many Harinam events and constantly immerse in, virtually visiting. So we may be here, but our heart would be in Vrindavan. We can directly go and, take darshan at Dham, various Dham. And of course, if we have Srimad Bhagavatam, then our home itself becomes a Dham. When we have deities at our home, it becomes a Dham. When we have constant chanting, recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many wonderful scriptures, that it becomes Dham. And in the association of devotees, our family members are all actually devotees, right? Jivera Sarupoya Krishna Nityadas. So every living entity is an eternal servant of Lord Shri Krishna. Some know it, some don't. So that is some are in material consciousness and some are in spiritual consciousness. So we have to come out of material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. So once Srila Prabhupada was asked this question, this was a very interesting one, that one of his disciples asked that Srila Prabhupada, when we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam and all, we're in Krishna consciousness, but sometimes when we go out, we get material consciousness. Srila Prabhupada responded in a very laughing manner, where he said that actually sometimes when we are engaged in devotional service, we are in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, most of the time when we are not engaged, we are in material consciousness. So we should try to remove that other activities and try to build everything with respect to Krishna consciousness. Now somebody could say, what does that mean? I have to do job, I have to take care of family, I have so many other prescribed duties, swadharmas, that I have to carry out as a family man, as a student, as a vanaprastha, one who has taken to retirement and one who is a sannyasi. Well, even in those different ashrams or different varnas, we have to perform our prescribed duties. But we have to align our prescribed duties with our Sanatana Dharma, with our eternal constitutional position. So Sanatana Dharma is Jivera Sarupoya Krishna. So we should be engaging all these services in a way that we are serving Lord Shri Krishna. He reveals this secret in 927 Bhagavad Gita. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yad juhoshi tadasi yat tapasyasi kanteya tat kurishva madar pranam. Whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever activities you perform, O Arjun, perform is as an offering to me. Lord Krishna is revealing. So everything that we do. And so Arjun, he employed his anger and fought as a Kshatriya at the battle, at Kurukshetra, and using his skills in pleasing who? Rishikesha, the master of the senses. So he attained perfection. And his senses were fully satisfied. He was initially bewildered because he found that associated with the body is the various upadhis, the various positions we take. And they were in conflict with each other. His ashram-based dharma as a family man and with the relatives, that was in conflict with his Kshatriya dharma based on his varna. And this conflict created him to feel that he cannot perform his duties. So when Lord Krishna aligned his Swadharma, his prescribed duties with his Sanatana Dharma, right? At that time he was re-established in his true position. Jivera Sarupoya Krishnera Nityadas. Krishnera Tatastha Shakti Bedha Bed Prakash. So living entity is Krishna's marginal energy, Tatastha Shakti. Bedha Bed Prakash it is Achintya Bedha Bed Tattva being described by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It has been described. And Srila Prabhupada also discusses it in Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. A very small book. If you read it, even in the beginning stage, Srila Prabhupada talks about this philosophy. That qualitatively we are one, the living entity is one with God, but quantitatively we are different. So qualitatively, Lord is Satchidanand. So we as living entity are all Satchidanand. Yet at the same time, He is magnanimous, He is like the ocean, and we are like the drop of the ocean. We are minuscule, we are minute. So from that perspective when we hear, now as Haṁsa-avatāra is revealing that one can understand in the wakefulness, dreaming and in deep sleep, void state. It's not void, but basically in a deep sleep there is no dream. One is completely like, in ignorance, fallen into darkness. That is the case. That's why void sometimes is being used to just represent darkness. So in that particular case, when one can perceive that these are the three stages, but that's not the person's true identity. These are the effects of the modes of material nature. So one should constantly meditate on me alone. So engage one's mind in meditating on Lord Shri Krishna. And by meditating on Lord Shri Krishna, one can attain perfection. So when he is talking about it later on, as Haṁsa-avatāra, Lord reveals that he is talking of Ashtanga Yoga. So he is saying that I have, revealed this to you in the, by following Ashtanga Yoga system. Also another aspect that he gives is that by the weapon of knowledge being sharpened, right, with knowledge, one can cut off the three modes of material nature. So the modes of material nature are also called as guna. Guna have the grammar meaning of guna. One of the meaning is ropes. So you can cut off the ropes. That's one way of looking at it. From chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that with the weapon of detachment, one can cut off this tree of the material world. That doesn't mean go out destroying things that you think that are sense objects. No. It is to change the perception, our outlook about things. That they are not to be enjoyed by us, but rather they are meant to be enjoyed by Lord Shri Krishna. And that takes a lot of humility and tolerance. So we have to cultivate it. That's why in the beginning itself, Lord Krishna said, by the cultivation in devotional service, one can transcend even the three modes, the mode of goodness. So all three modes one can transcend. So that is something we have to practice. Practice makes a man perfect. So we have to cultivate these characteristics. And we also talked about the austerity of mind, body and speech. So all actions that we perform are performed by mind, body and speech. So with respect to body, The austerity of body is to worship the elders, to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worship the spiritual master, worship the Brahmanas, worship the Vaishnavas, and worship mother and father, parents and the elders, and advanced devotees as well. Another aspect is keep our life simple, higher thinking, simple living, and keep it clean. So that Shuchi is another aspect. And constantly just not engage in overeating, just maintaining the body in a healthy state. So even the food we talked about in the three modes of material nature in Bhagavad Gita, even the sacrifices, charity and penances that are performed can be in three modes of material nature. So one has to constantly even engage all these activities with devotion to Lord Krishna as focus. Then they become transcendental to the three modes of material nature. Now being influenced by pride is an important subject. Why? Because pride cometh before fall. And we talk about this scenario where people, they become very proud even in the mode of goodness. They're thinking that I have all this knowledge and I'm so learned. And so that becomes the cause of their fall. Rather, one has to be very, very careful. And a very nice story that comes to mind is that there was on this plane, there were just 4 people traveling, and the plane engine, they bursted for some reason. And the pilot came out and said, okay, we only have 3 parachutes, so please grab a parachute and jump. And then he jumped out by taking 1 parachute, and then the 3 parachutes remaining. Now, who are the people remaining as passengers on this plane? A doctor, a lawyer, a priest, and a young boy, school-going boy. So at that time, the doctor got up and he said, see, I'm a doctor. I have to save so many lives. I'm always serving humanity, so I must live. And he picks up 1 parachute and then he jumps out. Then the lawyer gets up before anybody could react. And lawyer says, I'm a lawyer. Lawyers are the smartest men on this planet Earth, so I must live. And he picks up a bag and then he jumps out. And then the priest looks at the young boy, and the priest is, chanting on his rosary. And he says, why don't you grab the 3rd parachute and jump? The young boy said, giving actually 1 parachute to the priest, he said, don't worry, father. The smartest man of the earth just jumped out with my school bag. So sometimes people think that they're very smart and they try to even trick devotees like Srila Prabhupada. He had to go so much tribulation when trying to get the land for Juhu temple. So sometimes materialist people, they don't understand that the purpose is to benefit the humanity, and they give so much trouble to the devotees, not realizing that actually if they're trying to cheat, then Krishna is the topmost cheater, right? Just like the gopis, that was a sweet pastime, I should not use it. But it's a beautiful way of reflecting that Lord Krishna is the topmost. He is number 1 in everything. He's number 1 in beauty, he's number 1 in strength, and also is number 1 in cheating. So if you think you can cheat, then understand that Lord Krishna is the topmost cheater. You cannot cheat him. It's very interesting that sometimes when we were going to the temple, and this was revealed to us that, when you put something in hundi, right, as an offering to the Lordship, some money or something. So when you put money in there, it is said that Lord Krishna, he doesn't see what you're putting. He's seeing what you're holding back. And that is where our mentality comes in. What is the purpose? Why are we holding back? Why are we not letting go? And if it is still to be used in Krishna's service, he is very pleased. So our mindset matters, and that's what differentiates spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness from material consciousness. So with the power of knowledge, with the sword of knowledge, weapon of knowledge, all these 3 modes of material nature can be cut off. So when Haṁsa-avatāra reveals this, he says that I have also revealed to you the Sankhya philosophy, right, from that particular perspective, analytical knowledge perspective, which is very interesting, very thought-provoking for a Gyan Yogi, and especially to even highly knowledgeable, Vaishnavas. So they really enjoy. And of course, Shukdev Goswami, when he's speaking, he's also entertaining all the other great sages who are gathered in this gathering, along with, Parikshit Maharaj. He's the recipient, but there are many other great sages there. And then Sutta Goswami is revealing, reciting the whole Srimad Bhagavatam later on at Naimisharanya. So he's also, entertaining all the sages there who are relishing this sweet pastime as Lord Krishna he's providing this wonderful sweet message to Uddhav while telling him that with the coming of Kali age, he should immediately leave and go on this pilgrimage. Dvapare paricharyayam. So again, and attain perfection by meditating on Lord Shri Krishna. So when you are constantly thinking of Lord Shri Krishna, when you are hearing about Lord Shri Krishna, when you are singing about Lord Shri Krishna, then you are, when we are just like a rod in contact with fire becomes red hot and becomes like fire, then we all become Krishnaist, right? Yet at the same time, cleanliness is next to godliness. So we should always try to be in clean state. So that's why austerity of mind, body and speech should be used. We talked about austerity of body. Austerity of mind is to keep pure thoughts. And even pure is, Vishuddha Sattva state is just meditate our mind and name form activities, pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And speaking is supposed to be austerity of tongue or speech is to say pleasing things, not agitate others, to speak, truth, and so forth. And even better than that is to sing the glories of Lord Shri Krishna, his name form activities, pastimes, just like chanting of the holy name, reading out loud Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and so forth. So there are so many opportunities that are ahead of us. And with Janmashtami coming, we should take this opportunity, because this is like the sale time, right? This is like a spiritual sale. When Lord Krishna comes, he is going to, just look at how wonderfully we are serving him. And Srila Prabhupada also stressed that, we should serve Lord Krishna so that he would want to see us. Everybody wants to see the topmost person. But when we serve him so nicely that he would want to see us, that is our true skill, right? That is our true service. And that should be the mood as how we should be engaging our time and taking for our own purification. Lord Krishna is the proprietor of everything. He doesn't need anything. Yet at the same time, this is a great opportunity for us to take to devotional service and become Krishna conscious and engage and extend over the three modes of material nature. When Haṁsa-avatāra, he reveals that all this wonderful knowledge with Sankhya Yoga, with Ashtanga Yoga and so forth, Lord Brahma and the four sages are in pure consciousness. In that pure consciousness, they worship Lord Haṁsa-avatāra, Lord Krishna in Haṁsa-avatāra, and then they recite, the four sages, they recite transcendental poems, the songs, in glorifying Lord Shri Krishna. And at that time, Haṁsa-avatāra, he returns back to his abode. And this is where this chapter ends. Now, it's very interesting as we talk about the various kind of yoga systems. So, Uddhav is going to, in the next chapter, talk about, like you talked about so many philosophies, are these all philosophies on the same level or is there any difference? That is something we'll be catching up in the next chapter. Hare Krishna. So today we covered, just by taking to devotional service, one can easily transcend the three modes of material nature. And one of the simpler ways is to follow the regulative principles. No meat eating, including no eggs, fish, or onion and garlic. Onion and garlic is mode of ignorance, a mode of passion. That's why we don't encourage that. No intoxication, including no caffeine, tea, coffee, and sodas that contain caffeine. No illicit sex, no illicit sex outside marriage, and no gambling, because it destroys truthfulness. And chanting of the holy name, we can be Krishna conscious and engage in pleasing Lord Shri Krishna, Rishikesha, the master of the senses, and then our senses will be satisfied. Chant and be happy. A very simple mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Please join us for Harinam. Namaste Narasimhaya.
Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Janantu Kare Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.